If you want a different kind of film study, definitely check out my movie channel. We're having a lot of fun on there. I just made a video talking about ticking clocks in writing, how that can really add suspense to a scene. And it also explains why some movie scenes were boring because it didn't have that thing. So definitely check that out, or some movie reviews on there, or just, hey, go over and say hi. Either way, don't worry, I don't spoil anything unless I tell you beforehand I'm going to spoil something. So definitely check that out. Anyways, back to your regularly scheduled video. I think the Las Vegas Raiders are going to be in a very interesting spot next year. I want to talk about them, and I want to make a video about this just because it is odd, where I feel like they're a pretty decent team, but things just went off the rails this year. So where do they go in the future? Well, let's just get into it. So I have several charts. You know how I love charts on this channel. First chart we have here, I guess more of a list than a chart, whatever, I'll call them all charts, why not? This is a list of the notable free agents they have this season, and also how much their expected cap hit would be on a contract. This is using Sport Track and what their suggestions were for this stuff. And then also there's a couple that I had to input myself, just take a guess on myself because they didn't have a suggestion there. But that's what the number is next to each player. That is how many millions of dollars they're expected to get. So, you know, couple of big ticket guys here. I think Foster Moreau, Josh Jacobs, and Rocky Sin all should get decent contracts. For me personally, the guys who I have on the top section, you see there's that gap there. The guys I have below the gap, I'm saying I'm not re-signing. The guys above the gap, I am re-signing if I am the Raiders. That's how I view it. You could re-sign some of the guys in the bottom if you wanted to, but the big ones I already mentioned. Jermaine Illuminor also has had a very good year. I'd like to keep him if possible. And Mac Hollins, I mean, it feels like it would be a steal if he's only worth $2 million. Deron Harmon, a guy who always feels like he's a steal. So you could definitely get some valuable pieces back, but these are the guys that you need. Now, the question is, do they have the cap space to keep some of these guys? And the answer, as you see here, is kind of, right? They have $35 million in cap space for next season. Cash available, it's always difficult to figure out exactly how much a team can actually spend. I'm putting it at around 52 to 62-ish millions of dollars because that's how much cash they're already projected to spend. Teams tend to spend a little bit over the salary cap every year in terms of actual cash. Actual cash tends to be a better predictor than cap space, so that's why I use that. So with the money needed, they would need $44 million to re-sign everyone I said I think I would re-sign. So if you're gonna let some of those guys walk, you have to replace them with someone else. There also are ways to get that number down a little bit. Maybe you'll get some hometown discounts. You have the franchise tag at your disposal. That could be a thing for Josh Jacobs. So there are ways to get that number a little bit down. But realistically, they're looking at, kind of being right up against the cap, but maybe still having a little bit of extra cash to play around with. So if you do want to spend over the cap, you have that ability. Well, now let's look over here. So this is where Pro Football Focus has each of their categories ranked. One slight typo you'll see, they're not 7th in passing, but 17th in passing, which sounds a lot more right. I'm sure some people are saying, wait a second, 7th in passing, that feels high. No, 17th in passing, which is, you would like that to be higher. You're paying Derek Carr a lot of money. Derek Carr typically is better than 17th, but stuck at there for now. But maybe you hope for the future it'll be better. Offensive line has been fine, better at pass blocking than run blocking, interestingly, but the receiving core has been, tier 2 receiving core. Running game with Josh Jacobs has been Pro Football Focus's favorite running game, so part of why you want to keep Josh Jacobs is because of that, especially when you factor on the subpar run blocking, what he's been able to do. Yeah, definitely want to make sure you don't let him outside the building. Defense, run defense has been fine this year. Pass rush has been fine this year. A lot of that is Max Crosby and on both fronts, definitely pulling a lot of that weight. But hey, that's great. Keep him on the roster, obviously. Coverage has not been good here. And this has probably been the biggest drop from last year to this year has been the lack of coverage. So there are some notable free agents you could acquire. Jamel Dean is a corner that I think would actually fit that really well, would really help round out this coverage unit. Now, again, coverage, very hard to predict, can be very fluky, but that obviously does not mean you don't pay attention to it. They kind of didn't pay attention to it this year as much as they should have, letting Casey Hayward walk and things, and not really replacing him with anybody. That's been a big issue as they've struggled this year. And even I know Trayvon Mullen wasn't doing much with the Cardinals, but still a weird move to just let him go. So and not replace him with anybody, right? So that's probably the biggest area they need to improve upon. Although, as I mentioned, they don't have a ton of cap space to do it. Maybe to have a little bit. Again, there's always kind of a gray area of how much could they spend. They might be able to go out and get someone. They also could draft someone, but again, that's going to take time to develop, especially at the cornerback position. I do have to talk about one other thing they could do, which is something that, it's been brought up, so we have to mention it. This is Derek Carr's current contract, and what you notice about it is the contract itself is actually very tradable. If 2023 would be when they trade it, and if it's even a pre-June 1st trade, they're only taking on about $5.6 million in dead cap, and they're saving $30 million in doing that. So if they want to get rid of Derek Carr, that's the reason I'm bringing it up, they could. Now, couple things of note here is A, do you believe that this season was an anomaly? Do you believe that Derek Carr just had a bad year, or is he not as good anymore? We have seen quarterbacks take a step back in their 30s. That is something that does happen. Now, it's a decision that they're going to have to make, because if he is legitimately the 17th best quarterback in football, well, then this is an absurd contract to be paying him. However, if he's typically that sort of top 10 quarterback we've seen him being, then it's not a bad contract. It's also worth mentioning that if you were to get rid of him, well, you have to figure out what you're going to do in that scenario. Maybe you draft a quarterback and go that way. I think if Tom Brady's available, this could be interesting, as you could get out of the Derek Carr contract and use that money to sign Tom Brady. Doesn't really help your coverage unit situation, but hey, I would say Brady is an upgrade over Carr, at least how they both played this year, although Brady hasn't had his best year either, so maybe that would scare you off from it. I think what I do is I think I still keep Carr, especially, again, this contract, very tradable, and the cap hit next year still isn't that bad. It's just $34 million. It jumps up to $43 million the following year, so I think I still give it one more year. I try to find a corner or two. Really, I mean, Rocky Sin's a fine corner. I think that they could just use another guy in the building. Obviously, Nate Hobbs is very good as a slot guy. Kind of just need, I feel like they could use one more corner to really round out that coverage unit, and maybe some safety help as well. But as a whole, I don't know. I just feel like there's some potential for this team to still be good next year. I do. I think that there is some things to like about this Raiders roster. I don't think it's a bad roster whatsoever. Again, you look at those PFF grades and you're like, they're pretty solid at everything. And even like my analytical power rankings have them as like a fringe playoff team caliber talent that just has underperformed this year. So, that happens. Part of that, people will always equate that to coaching, which is a part of it for sure, but it's not the only part of it. That's something that you also have to mention, is that it's not like that's the key thing. There is just a huge element of randomness and luck. We like to pretend like sports, there's no luck involved. There's a ton of luck involved, especially in a sport where the ball isn't even round. The ball is an odd shape and can bounce in a weird way, just based on happenstance, and that can be the difference in football games sometimes. I mean, who knows? That Eagles-Patriots game when Brady fumbled in the last couple minutes, what if the ball bounced weirdly and a Patriot got it instead of the Eagle getting it? Like, that could have happened, and that would have maybe changed the Super Bowl, right? There's luck involved here. I'm not saying that the Raiders have only gotten unlucky this year, but that's been a factor, and it's more than just the ball bouncing in a weird way. There's plenty of different factors. Maybe you have, for some reason, they happened to go up against Kyler Murray when Kyler Murray was just on and making absurd plays. And it wasn't just like their defense sucked and made him look good. Like, he just happened to have like his best game of the season against you. Like, that's a luck factor. I think they're a decent team, but there's still room for improvement. They could improve. One other thing that I wanted to bring up, though, is part of why I talked about Derek Carr and how much it would cost to get rid of his contract is they don't really have many other get-riddable contracts. There's no big, okay, you could get rid of this guy and clear up $15 million type thing. Chandler Jones, he's on the books next year, right? Like, that's a tough contract. Didn't really work out the way you wanted it to work out this year. So, now you have to pay him. You're stuck with that, right? So, unless you can trade him to someone who will, take on the contract, maybe you do something like that. But probably you got most of the guys that are on contract next year. You're probably just keeping most of those guys. But, I think that probably the best move forward, and it's maybe not the most fun move forward, but probably the best move forward is just keep with the status quo and draft secondary help, and make sure you try to get secondary help and try to work on that position and hope that you get a rookie who plays well. Like, listen, as much as I want to say rookie corners take time to develop, like, look at Sauce Gardner and look at how great of a rookie season he's had. If you had something like that immediately turns you into a real contender. So do that and just hope Derek Carr looks like Derek Carr again next year. That's what I would do. What would you do? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And of course, as always, thanks for watching.